Hello and welcome to this edition of the So What box, where we are going to learn how to make an easy self-binding baby blanket. I want to thank you guys for bearing with me as this video has come out a little bit later this month than normal, but I did have a bad horseback riding accident and was unable to film the video. You will notice that in the second half and the majority of this video is actually my grandmother in front of the camera. So thanks, Grandma, for all the help. Let's get sewing. First, we're going to go ahead and open our box, and we're going to find our welcome card, 2 pieces of cut fabric, coordinating thread, and pins and a sewing machine needle. First, let's unfold the smaller flannel piece of fabric, and we are going to use some pins to mark the center of each edge. So first, let's fold along the first cut edge, getting the corners even and placing a pin in the halfway mark after we fold. We're going to do this with all 4 cut edges of this piece of fabric. While you do this, make sure that you only go through 1 layer of fabric with your pin so that you can easily open this fabric up and lay it flat without the pin catching. Once you get done with this flannel piece, we're going to do the same thing and mark all 4 cut edges in the center on the larger minky piece of fabric. Lay the large piece of minky fabric right side up on the table. With the right side up, the soft, furry, and bubbly part should be facing you. This is the right side of the fabric, and this is the side that we will want to see once the blanket is finished. Lay the right side of the smaller flannel piece face down on the table, so that the right sides of these pieces of fabric are together. The right side of the flannel piece is the piece that you want to see when the blanket is finished. We are going to line up 1 raw edge of these pieces of fabric. Since the cut edges are different sizes, we are going to use those pins that we used to mark the center of each length, and we are going to match those up and pin along the edge with those matched. There will be an extra length on both sides of this blanket that do not have the flannel piece pinned to them. Begin sewing where the flannel begins. This will be in a little bit from the edge as the minky piece is longer than the flannel piece. Make sure that you put the right side of your presser foot against the right side of your pinned seam. Begin sewing forward, and you can take a few backward stitches as you begin as well. As you continue sewing the length of this pinned seam, remember to pull the pins out as you go. You don't want to break your sewing machine needle or any pins. Once you reach the edge of the flannel piece, you can back up a few more stitches and then continue forward. ending your sewing where the smaller flannel piece ends against the minky fabric. Now we are going to do the same thing that we did on the first edge by lining up the pinned centers of the edge lengths with each other on the two opposite sides of this blanket. Once you pin all the way along both of these sides, you will have a little weird flap that has not been pinned at each corner. This is normal and we will deal with those later. Begin sewing these lengths of pinned seam together where the flannel meets the minky fabric on the last seam that you sewed. You want to make sure that you have pulled that weird corner flap out of the way so that you don't accidentally sew through those layers of fabric as well. Remember to remove pins as you sew the length of this seam and repeat with the other side. Now we are going to pin the fourth edge of these pieces together, just like we did the first three. Remember to begin by matching the centers of these two lengths. Now we want to make sure that we leave a hole in the center of this edge that's about the width of our hand. So go ahead and put 2 pins in backwards on either side of your hand, and this is where you are going to remember to stop and start sewing. We are also going to pull the center pins from between these 2 backwards pins out, so that we don't accidentally get confused and sew this hole shut. This hole is going to be how we flip the blanket right side out when we are finished. Now we will sew this as normal like we did the last 2 seams, but make sure that when you get to that first backwards pin, you back up and drive forward a couple stitches and then pull your fabric away from the sewing machine, skipping over the length between those backwards pins and starting again where your second backward pin is. Continue then sewing to the very edge of this seam. Now that we have all 4 straight edges sewn, we need to deal with these weird corners. They're not as hard as you think. First, let's focus on one corner and fold both raw edges that we just sewed together to make a point at the corner. This point might not match up exactly like you want it to, but as long as it's close, everything will work out fine. Make sure that your sewn edges are lined up, and then grab a ruler and make a mark that is perpendicular to the folded edge of the minky fabric. This means that we want a right angle triangle that has the right angle on the folded edge of the fabric. The ruler should meet the raw sewn edge right where that flannel fabric ends and your sewing of these seams started. This way, when we make this mark, we will overlap this sewn edge just a tiny bit. Stick a few pins in this area so that the fabric does not wiggle around on us, and then do the same thing on all four corners. Now we are going to use these lines that we drew as a sewing line. Go ahead and sew on these lines on all four corners. Make sure that you back up when you begin and end this straight stretch. Once you have these sewn, take a pair of scissors or pinking shears like we have in this video and trim these corners off. Make sure that you are cutting on the outside of your Sharpie and sewing line. We just want to get rid of all this extra bulk for when we fold the blanket right side out. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and reach into that hole that you left on the one long edge and turn the fabric right side out by grabbing a piece from the far side and pulling. In order to easily close this hole that we just pulled everything through, we are going to fold the minky fabric over the flannel fabric and pin this in place. Make sure that you fold enough into this hole that when we sew along the edge, we will catch it and there will be no hole. Make sure to pin through all the thickness of this fabric. Once you have that pinned, come on over to your sewing machine and we are going to sew just along the pinned hole, and make sure that you back up when you start and finish. We're going to make sure that we are sewing right along the edge of this minky fabric. Congratulations! You just made a super easy self-binding baby blanket. Now you can keep it or gift it. If you have not yet discovered the Sew What box or our other pre-cut sewing projects, Head on over to tailormade.com and check it out.